Everybody is trying to make sense of what drives people to do the terrible things that we are hearing in the Epstein files. If we look to history and even the Bible, we can get some insight into what is behind some of these acts. In this video, I will break down the belief system surrounding Baal worship, Moloch worship, and Luciferianism. It's important to understand the differences between these beliefs and not just group them together as one similar system. If we're ever going to combat evil, then we must understand its components. Understanding how groups of people behave starts with understanding what they believe. So, to understand this stuff better, let's look into some complex and often misunderstood belief systems from history, Luciferianism, Moloch worship, and Baal worship. We'll explore what they are, how they differ, which civilizations practice them, and what ancient texts, including the Bible, have to say about them. This is a journey into ancient history and theology, and my goal is to help you understand. If you believe in God, then you have to understand what you're up against. Knowledge is power, and your best defense against evil is to know how it operates. Some of the topics I will cover in this video are discussed more in depth in other videos I have made. My last video covered Baal worship, and it did pretty well, but I encourage you to watch it if you haven't seen it yet. I will link 2 separate videos at the end of this video that I think might be of value if you want to learn more about these subjects. And if you take a quick second to subscribe to my YouTube channel, then it will make it easier for you to find my videos in the future. I have over 200 videos, all made in the last year and a half. I want to thank everyone for supporting me. I'm just a one-man team, so please feel free to comment any ideas or thoughts you have. And aside from subscribing, watching some of my previous content really helps my channel. First, let's talk about Baal and Moloch. 2 deities often mentioned in the same breath and worshipped by ancient Near Eastern cultures, particularly the Canaanites. Baal, whose name simply means Lord or Master, was a prominent weather and fertility god. Think of him as the bringer of rain, the one responsible for bountiful harvests and the continuation of life. He was a central figure in the Canaanite pantheon, and his worship was widespread. Civilizations like the Phoenicians and Canaanites revered him, building temples and high places in his honor. The famous city of Ugarit in modern-day Syria has given us a wealth of texts that detail the myths and rituals surrounding Baal. He was often depicted as a powerful warrior, sometimes holding a club or a lightning bolt, symbolizing his control over storms. Both of these are kind of mainstream news right now, as being exposed as part of the Epstein files that were recently released. While not specifically referred to, it's obvious that there's a connection. Baal is often depicted as a goat, whereas Moloch is often represented by an owl. These are important things to notice, along with various symbols used in representing each belief. Now, let's turn to Moloch. This name is much more ominous and is almost exclusively associated with a horrific ritual, child sacrifice. The name Moloch might not even refer to a specific deity, but rather to the ritual itself. The Hebrew word Molech means king, but it's used in the biblical text to describe this particular form of offering. The practice involved passing children through the fire to Moloch. While scholars debate the exact nature of this ritual, whether it was literal burning or a dedication ceremony, the biblical accounts in books like Leviticus and 2 Kings are unequivocal in their condemnation of it as a horrifying abomination. For example, Leviticus 18:21 explicitly forbids it, saying, "You shall not give any of your children to offer them to Moloch." King Solomon is even said to have built a high place for Moloch, which later kings, like Josiah, destroyed in an attempt to purify the nation's worship. So, while Baal was a god of life and fertility, Moloch became synonymous with death and a terrifying form of devotion. The key difference is the focus. Baal was about sustaining life through agriculture, while Moloch worship centered on this extreme sacrificial act. It's possible that in some places these deities merged or were seen as different aspects of the same power, but the biblical texts draw a clear and dark distinction. The worship of Baal and Moloch wasn't limited to the Canaanites. It spread through trade and cultural exchange, particularly the version known as Baal Haman, to their colonies across the Mediterranean, most famously to Carthage in North Africa, especially in times of crisis, dedicating their children to Baal Haman and the goddess Tanit. Archaeological discoveries of Tophet's cemetery, the urns of cremated infants in Carthage, and other Punic sites have fueled this debate for decades. While some argue these were just cemeteries for children who died of natural causes, the sheer number and the presence of animal remains suggest a more complex ritualistic purpose. So, how does the Bible address these practices? Constantly. The struggle between the monotheistic worship of Yahweh and the polytheistic worship of Baal is a central theme of the Old Testament. The prophet Elijah's famous showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel in 1 Kings is a dramatic example. Elijah challenges them to see which deity can bring fire down from heaven to consume a sacrifice. Baal fails, but fire descends for Elijah, demonstrating the power of Yahweh. The Old Testament repeatedly warns the Israelites against adopting the practices of their neighbors, seeing Baal worship as a betrayal of their covenant with God. Jesus himself doesn't specifically name Baal or Moloch in the Gospels. His focus was more on the internal state of the heart and the hypocrisy of religious leaders of his own day. However, his teachings were a radical continuation of the prophet's call to reject all forms of idolatry and to worship God alone in spirit and in truth. When he spoke of mammon, the Aramaic word for wealth, as a competing master to God, he was tapping into that same ancient theme. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and the idols of the world, whether they are statues of Baal or the pursuit of wealth and power. We have all heard the phrase money is the root of all evil. And we see this time and time again in our culture today. Now, let's shift gears to Luciferianism, which is a completely different animal. Unlike the ancient worship of Baal and Moloch, Luciferianism is a modern philosophical and spiritual belief system. It does not involve the worship of a deity named Lucifer or the devil as a literal being. Instead, it reinterprets the character of Lucifer. The name Lucifer comes from Latin and means light bringer. It was originally the name for the planet Venus, the morning star. A passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, describes the fall of a tyrannical Babylonian king, using the metaphor of a fallen morning star. Early Christian writers, like Jerome, later applied this Lucifer metaphor to Satan, the rebellious angel who fell from heaven. Modern Luciferianism takes this figure and sees him not as an embodiment of evil, but as a symbol of rebellion, enlightenment, knowledge, and self-empowerment. Luciferians don't worship a devil. Instead, they champion the pursuit of knowledge, the questioning of authority, and the full development of the individual's potential. They see the story of the fall not as a tragedy, but as a necessary break from dogmatic obedience in order to gain wisdom and free will. It's a philosophy that values intellect, personal freedom, and the balance between light and darkness within oneself. It has nothing to do with ancient fertility rites or child sacrifice. It's a modern interpretation of a mythological figure, rooted in a desire for individual sovereignty and enlightenment. So, to be clear, Baal and Moloch were ancient deities worshipped by entire civilizations with physical temples and state-sponsored rituals. Luciferianism is a modern esoteric philosophy focused on the individual's inner journey and intellectual freedom. To recap the key distinctions, Baal was a major ancient god of fertility and weather, a central part of a pantheon. Moloch is associated with the horrific rite of child sacrifice, a practice condemned in the Bible. Both were part of the ancient Canaanite and Phoenician religious landscape. Their worship involved external, physical rituals, temples, and communal participation. Luciferianism, on the other hand, is a modern philosophy. It uses the figure of Lucifer as a symbol for enlightenment, free thought, and individualism. There are no ancient temples to Lucifer, and it has no connection to the historical worship of Baal or Moloch. The only thread connecting them is that all three have been viewed by Abrahamic religions as adversarial to the worship of one true God. But their origins, practices, and core beliefs are worlds apart. Understanding these differences is crucial to having an accurate picture of ancient history and modern spirituality. I plan to make a video, maybe my next video even, That will be about the symbols used to represent these different beliefs. We often see these symbols in our daily life and don't realize what they stand for, so keep an eye out for that video soon. Thank you so much for supporting my work. I hope this brought some clarity to these complex topics. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time. And as always, stay informed.